To be clear right up front, I've already finished this entire game. I've read all of the story of this whole thing. And I'm going to talk like I have, right from the start of this. So, don't use this perhaps as maybe your first experience, or a first way of experiencing the last two trials, or last two trials and one investigation of SDRA. Because I've played this whole thing on the Zephyrin build, and I know everything that happens. And then I talk about everything that happens right from the start as well. Now, if I recall correctly, I think the original Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc, on the title screen, it would randomly assign characters to the title screen. So you get a different characters at the title screen each time you booted the game. Now, I would understand that would probably be maybe a bit complicated to implement, if even possible, in RPG Maker 2000. I have not personally tried to use RPG Maker 2000, so don't know all of the complications of implementing something like that, if you could. But Linju chose to just put these two characters on the screen the whole time. These two characters, as if you were to choose two characters to put on the screen, he put these two. Which, I mean, aesthetically may not have been my choice, just because they both have a very similar hair color, and the way this particular image is colored seems to decrease that contrast, right? Akane's hair is darker color than Yuki's hair, but that contrast isn't as apparent on this title screen, and so it's just an orange overload. Anyway, this particular pair is very important, of course, if not a bit disturbing. So I'm gonna do my usual thing, and bring up a document, which is not going to be that. I'm going to pause the encoding while I do it. Okay, that didn't take very long. We're not going to get to these notes later. But that's just so that I don't have to bring up the notes while I'm talking. So I guess kind of generally what I thought of this. What stands out the most is, just in general, the commercial Danganronpa, I'm emphasizing primarily Trigger Happy Havoc here, but it's the case for all of them, came across is a bit more silly than this fan game by Linju. Linju tends to go a little bit more serious. And the personalities in the original Danganronpa were more extreme, and the characters had a tendency to get over deaths much faster. They're much more loose, and people weren't as cerebral, so to speak. This particular game, the characters, if I go through the list of characters, seem to be kind of serious. So, Kobashikawa. I actually have Kogashikawa here. It's probably a typo. It probably should be Kobashikawa. Yeah, it seemed to be kind of a silly character. They decided to give him this some affinity for girls. However, the way that he was used in the chapter 4, I suppose, of this story is a bit more seriously than the silliest characters of commercial Danganronpa are typically used. It was still pretty silly, and it was stupid, but it wasn't like, it was something that, say, the super high school level fortune teller, I know they commercial English translation, they said clairvoyant, but I always think it was a fortune teller, wouldn't do and would not be used to do, right? It's something that Toko wouldn't do and would be used to do. It requires more thought and intellect to do that orchestration of the Chapter 4 case than either of those characters had. And Kobashikawa is pretty much the silliest character in this game. So that's the bottom already. And he's already doing stuff that's more cerebral in nature than the silliest characters of, far more so than multiple of the silliest characters in Trigger Happy Havoc. Akane. Nothing really silly about her. She just seems kind of like an ordinary girl. And her super high school level talent isn't really that overblown and dominating her personality that much. It's only like mentioned here or there. Ayama Hitano, again, a rather serious character with serious thoughts and very human, right? She's not really that silly. Mitsuhiro Higa. Yes, he is a Leon export, but he is less silly than Leon. Especially when you see him in the flashbacks. Kakeru Yamaguchi has this personality that may resemble the super high school level team manager from Danganronpa 2, but again, much less silly. Kanata Inori, again, not silly whatsoever. Kizuna Tomori, I mean, I wouldn't call that silly. Kinjo, not silly. Mikako Kurukawa, not silly in the slightest. Teruya Otori, kind of an idiot, but not silly. Rei Mekaru, it's like Byakuya, but more serious, right? Kyoka Maki, we don't really see very much of her, but she just seems like a rather ordinary girl, right? Kinji Uhara, not silly at all. Iranami Satsuki, she's the clown for crying out loud, and she really isn't that silly. Yuki Maeda, so generally these are just, there's just not as many jokes. There's not as much characters being stupid. There's not characters' personality being dominated by the super high school level talent so much. And that's just a general feel. Everything is just heavier. It's just supposed to weigh on you way harder. There's much less comic relief. Now, in general, I was much less sucked into this than I was Trigger Happy Havoc. That was a much less engaging, page-turning, can't wait to get home from work and watch, because I watched a Let's Play, I didn't actually play Trigger Happy Havoc, the next episode or whatever, right? It didn't quite give me the same feeling. Now, that isn't necessarily fair. I would pin down exactly why that is, but it turns out with Danganronpa that generally the first one is more engaging, I would think. This happens with the mainline Danganronpa games, where the first one is more engaging and the second one and third ones are just like drag more. And I think that's just because you've seen the template of a Danganronpa and you know how it ends and you know how it's going to go, it much less teases you with the potential of, doing something like, say, kill off Kyoko, right? And the later games in the series may be less engaging, less suspenseful, simply just because you already played a Danganronpa and they're just later games in the series. So this game by Linju may be less suspenseful feeling, but actually maybe nothing of its own, no fault of the game itself whatsoever, but purely because you've already played probably multiple Danganronpas at this point, and your brain is just kind of inured to it. And that's pretty much the only reason I can think of. I haven't been able to dig into and really discover the mechanics of why this might be slightly less. You get slightly less get sucked into it as an ordinary Danganronpa is. Okay, so I just like to do this for fun. Doesn't really mean much. Kind of discuss who I thought was going to be a Blackend, who I thought was going to be a victim, and who I thought would survive at the end. after I played through the character introductions in the first episode and how correct I was. So for Haruhiko Kobashikawa, I rewatched the episode and it didn't seem that I actually put a guess as to what he actually would be. He turned out to be the Chapter 4 victim, but I just didn't guess. So of course I was wrong because I didn't guess. Akane Taira, I guessed that she would be a Blackened, but I didn't guess a chapter by which she would be a Blackened. If you can take process of elimination here, where I thought, Higo was a Chapter 1 Blackened, Kurokawa would be a Chapter 3 Blackened, and Yuhara would be a Chapter 4 Blackened. I guess you could say that Taira would be the Chapter 2 Blackened, or the Chapter 5 Blackened. But I didn't take a guess as to which one. And she turned out to be what I would call a Chapter 6 extra death, somewhat analogous to the death of Kibo at the end of V3. Right? He's not really a victim, or a survivor, or a Blackened. He dies in Chapter 6 as someone who... I guess you can't really be a survivor if you die, but... it's just because his role to play is not the same as the survivor, even though he survives the game up to that point. You can also have extra deaths at other times, like Mukuro in Trigger Happy Havoc you could consider as a extra death of Chapter 1. However, you could also think of her as the Chapter 5 victim. So... Kibo's still the best analogy. Ayama Hatano, I thought she was going to be a survivor, but she turned out to be the Chapter 2 Blackened. Mitsuhiro Higa, I thought he was going to be the Chapter 1 Blackened because he really seemed like an export of Leon to me, and I was correct. Yamaguchi, I thought he would be the Chapter 4 victim because he was the big strong guy. But it turned out he died early. He was actually the Chapter 3 victim. One of the two Chapter 3 victims. Kinata Inori, I thought she would be a Chapter 2 victim. I was right, she was a victim, but I was one chapter early. She was actually going to be one of the Chapter 3 victims. Kizuna Tomori, I thought she would be a Chapter 3 victim, but I was one chapter late. She turned out to be the Chapter 2 victim. Saruki Kinjo, I thought he would be a Chapter 3 victim, sort of like Taka from Trigger Happy Havoc. And that was incorrect. He turned out to be a survivor. Kurokawa, I thought she would be a Chapter 3 Blackened. I thought she would be the person who would come out as crazy and do a double murder. This prediction vanished quickly as I got to know Kurokawa over the first couple chapters, but it is true that right after the character introductions, I thought she was going to be a Chapter 3 Blackened. And that's incorrect. She was the character who would fill the role of the Chapter 5 Blackened. She didn't actually kill anybody, but she would be, executed in place of the Chapter 5 Blackened, kind of like, what's his face? Makoto Naegi did in Trigger Happy Havoc, but unlike Makoto Naegi, she does not survive. Teruya Otori, I thought he would be a survivor. Kind of like Yasuhiro, I remember his name now. And I was correct, he would turn out to be a survivor. Rei Mikaru, I thought she would become a survivor, like Byakuya, and I was correct, she turned out to be a survivor. Kyoka Maki, I thought she would be a survivor, and I was wrong, she turned out to be the Chapter 1 victim. Kinji Yuhara, I thought he would be a Chapter 4 Blackened, and I was one chapter late, he turned out to be the Chapter 3 Blackened. Iranami Satsuki, I thought would be the Chapter 1 victim, and she turned out to be the Chapter 4 victim. Yuki Maeda, I thought he would survive, but he was a Chapter 6 extra death, probably. So, it's kind of how you think of it, right? Junko dies at the end of dies at the end of Chapter 6. But you can kind of think of Junko as a Chapter 6 Blackened. Because she is executing herself, because she killed Mukuro and got caught. Right? She's like the real Blackened in the Chapter 5 case. Same thing with oh, I forgot what the cosplayer's name is already. Oh, Tsumugi. Yes, Tsumugi. In V3, she's executing herself as the rightful Blackened for Chapter 1. Yuki Maeda, or Utsuru, as his real name is, isn't executed so much as a Blackened. He isn't even executed. He just maybe or maybe not dies in the collapse of the building that they're in. The reason why I say maybe not is because according to the exposition of the lore at the end, Utsuru would often want to die and then attempt to commit suicide. But right before his death, his survival instinct would kick in and he would change his mind by the small brain. And because of his super any level talent, which basically allowed him to get anything he wanted whenever he wanted it, his talent would grant him survival based on that, and he would never actually succeed in dying. The dialogue between Akane and Utsuru at the end suggests that Utsuru has finally resigned himself. He has finally committed to dying, and he will succeed that time. However, you don't know for certain. There's no way to know for certain. So, it's possible he survived. But the implication is that he died. So if you were to take a guess as to what Linju would do if he were to make a sequel with the same characters, you would guess that he would be dead. So kind of a general trend here. This is not always the case. Some of the victim, I guess the victim who would be a survivor, a survivor who actually turned out to be a victim, and so on. You'll tend to notice I tend to get Blackened and victim kind of correct, and survivor generally correct. But I had a tendency to miss by one chapter, right? Miss by one chapter, miss by one chapter, miss by one chapter, miss by one chapter. And of course, Satsuki missed by 3 chapters. So that's kind of the thing I tended to do with these predictions. Just for fun. And then, of course, we have the chapter-by-chapter predictions right before going into the trial, who I think did it. So for Chapter 1, I thought going into it, it would be Mitsuhiro Higa, and I was correct. It turned out to be Mitsuhiro Higa. Chapter 1 was one of the simplest cases in Danganronpa history, I suppose. I mean, the simplest Danganronpa case you could think of was the Blackened was motivated directly by the motivation that Monokuma provided in that chapter, selected a target, premeditated or pre-planned out how they're going to kill that target, executed that plan, and killed the victim that they intended to kill, and only that victim. And they only killed one and that's it, right? There is one case I can think of in the commercial Danganronpa that is that straightforward, that is perfectly straightforward, and is like the model case with no real crazy twists in it. And that is Chapter 2 of V3. With the maid, whatever her name is, I can't remember these characters' names, kills the tennis player, whatever his name was. Don't remember these characters' names. Right? She was motivated directly by the motivation Monokuma provided, directly, just as you would have seen what his motivation was. Right? There wasn't any twist to motivation. You knew that he was showing somebody something that would motivate everybody to want to leave, right? So there's an expectation that everybody would have seen a something that would motivate them to leave. Whatever. Is that the they passed around different people, different videos? I forget how that motive worked. And the maid selected a victim, made a plan to kill that victim, executed that plan to kill that victim. That victim got killed. And it's that straightforward. That's why that case isn't very memorable in hindsight, because it doesn't have very much tricky stuff going on with it. It's very blasé. Chapter 1 of this game was also fairly straightforward. However, it did have that slight complication in that he intended to kill Kinjo, the policeman, but instead killed the sniper. This is a way that maybe Linjo is trying to resolve that whole issue of, it's odd that in commercial Danganronpa games, the Blackens tend to not heavily target the characters that would seem most likely to be able to figure out who did it. You would think that they would try to take out the characters that are most likely to find out that you were the one who killed whoever the victim was. Even though no cases had occurred so far in the game by the time Chapter 1 happened in this game, Kinjo, just by merits of being a policeman, would have been someone you suspected might be good at figuring out who did it. And so he would be a good target to shoot for. That's the only real reason why I would think that Linjo wrote that he got originally intended to kill Kinjo. Because it doesn't really add much complication to the logic you go through in figuring out that he is the Blackened. It just kind of adds a little bit to the story to maybe make the story be a little bit more believable and natural. The case is obviously higher quality than that of Trigger Happy Havoc because it doesn't have the Leon obviously written on the wall, and you know it says Leon immediately upon seeing it, but then somehow the main character can't see it. And it turns out to be the straw that breaks the camel's back, even though it's immediately obvious. But it's still but even though it doesn't have just writing on the wall literal clue like that, it is kind of a variation on the idea of chapter 1 of Trigger Happy Havoc. You still have the athlete doing it using his athletics, and his athletics as associated with his accuracy. It's similar logic, a similar situation with characters of similar personalities, without the complication of it was actually a kind of self-defense-ish, but more so than would actually be self-defense, turn back around on the victim thing. Leads you save that for Chapter 2. Overall, the case isn't really that interesting. It's kind of lame, but it doesn't have the flaws that the Chapter 1 of Trigger Happy Havoc had. And it's okay because it's a first chapter. Your first chapter doesn't have to be that crazy, given it is kind of the hook. But even though it is the hook, I expect the later chapters to be better anyway, so I don't necessarily get de-hooked. Hook. De-hooked. If the Chapter 1 case isn't really that interesting. So, Chapter 2 case. The Blackened was a Yame Hatano. I managed to guess it was a Yame Hatano. Barely. It seems kind of obvious in hindsight that would be the answer, but for some reason it wasn't obvious to me in foresight. In this case, Linju tries to add that extra complication of this was a sort of self-defense-ish turnabout on the Blackened, where the victim, somewhat reminiscent of Chapter 1 of Trigger Happy Havoc, where the victim originally intended to commit a murder, but instead got the knife turned back on them. And it was a knife, a kitchen knife, in fact, just like Chapter 1 of Trigger Happy Havoc. With additional complication on top of that, of something that I don't know if, this is, yes, commercial Danganronpa does do this, of what I would call taking the fall as a Blackened for your friend. So this is when somebody does something which would cause somebody else to die, but not an immediate death. There's some lingering of life. And if you become the Blackened in Danganronpa, it is very likely, in fact, as far as we can tell, like 100% chance so far, that the other characters will find out you did it and you will be executed. So someone you cares about kills someone for whatever reason, but that person is slowly dying, and not killed immediately, you could theoretically save them from being a Blackened by finishing off the character who's dying, and therefore die as the Blackened in their place to save them. This was done in Chapter 5 of V3. So Commercial Danganronpa did do something like this, where Kaito finishes off Kyokichi to save Maki. And this was kind of less tragic because Kaito was going to die anyway. So all he did was save someone's life at no loss. However, he was intentionally given that disease by the producers of the show, which makes it still tragic. He was still murdered, essentially. And then, Linju adds on another additional complication, and that the salvation, the person who's trying to save the life of the other person by saving them from being the Blackened, decided to change her mind and try to obscure she was the Blackened, and then went to, and then add this, well, I would be dead anyway, so it's better if I live crippled than die, and crippled herself, and made everything very harebrained. It's so harebrained that the additional complication almost narrows in for you who the Blackened is. It makes it almost hard to get wrong. But despite the ridiculous amount of complication, the logic that the characters go through in the trial is written surprisingly well, and I kind of like it. So it's pretty good, even if it's overthought and saturated, or whatever you want to call it. Chapter 3, I thought it was going to be a Kane tie run. I based this purely on the slit wrists, which wasn't a good guess. It turned out to be Kinji Yuhara. And the logic you would have to go through to find out is Kinji seems obvious in hindsight and would be pretty simple. You first figure out the AM/PM omission trick, which I did. But then, once you've done that, you come to the conclusion that Yamaguchi was killed at 8:30, or whatever that time was, PM the previous day, which is before nighttime. And, which is, so whatever. You don't even have to figure out that trick, though. Yeah, you actually don't. All you have to do is say, Akane said that the door to the lab was locked before nighttime began. Yuhara said that the cell phone used in the trick that involved the locked lab door was taken from him after nighttime began, therefore Yuhara is lying. And that makes him suspicious and likely that he is the killer. That's all you need to do. And despite that simple thing and all you need to do, somehow it didn't work. Somehow I failed. That one is somewhat simpler, except anything would be somewhat similar simpler than Chapter 2. And seemed like a disappointingly short trial at the time. The logic you had to go through seemed really simple, actually, in the trial itself. And the case didn't really have a whole lot of meat, really, to sink your teeth into. It also has sort of a little bit of that two-murder motivation problem. It is a double murder by means of one of the victims walking in on you, performing the other murder thing. Similar to Danganronpa 2, it's double murder, and also V3's, but V3's was stupid for another reason. However, you could argue Yuhara didn't have to finish off and actually kill actually kill Inori. That being said, for some reason, Yuhara actually committed to perhaps actually escaping as the Blackened and killing everybody. I don't really understand why I want to do that. Go all the way to that level, because his deal with Monokuma was only, I will spare the children if you kill somebody, not if you kill somebody and then escape. But he actually wanted to go all the way and escape. And if you wanted to do that, remember, you'd have to kill everybody, because everybody would be executed but you. So in that case, it doesn't really, you're going to be killing everybody anyway, so might as well kill two people, especially if one of them, could have woken up from being passed out, and their timing that they could report in their testimony could possibly be used against you. And having two victims allowed him to do some trick that would try to obscure the time of deaths. Similar to how, it would be similar to how Celeste was trying to do a double murder, obscure the time of deaths as well. Celeste was just making things way too complicated, and as such, just gave herself away really easily. Most double murders seem to come out really stupid, just in general, because there's always the question of why would you do a double murder? You always just leave behind more evidence. And the answer to that is always, and isn't really ever a good answer. In the case of Celeste, there is no answer. It's just stupid. In the case of Mikon in Danganronpa 2, it's because she was trying to just she wasn't even really trying to murder people to get out. She was just murdering people because she just liked to murder people. Because she was just filled with despair, and that's what happens when you're that like that, apparently. And then whoever that guy's name was, in V3, that was just stupid again. It was just a meme at that point. Anyway, Chapter 4. I thought that Haruhiko Kogashikawa, I guess Kogashikawa, whatever that letter is, he did some sort. I guess that he was the one who set up the whole thing, right? He scattered the guns all over the place and barred the door and everything. So, and that is true. That was a good guess. So he did a suicide, but he did a suicide in such a way and made the situation interesting enough that Monokuma bothered to do a trial anyway, despite it being a suicide. And that was sorta close to correct. I mean, he did intentionally create a situation in which he would die. But he did a thing where he made it technically not suicide, because he died by the hand, technically, of Satsuki. Technically not suicide is something also done by Nagito in the 5th case of Danganronpa 2. However, it's even more of a technicality how it's not suicide. I would consider it very much a suicide in my head. But anyway, it's something that's been done in commercial Danganronpa, but Minju does it again here. It is near impossible to guess that it's Satsuki, though, that he used to make it technically not suicide, because there is no evidence pointing to Satsuki whatsoever, at least physically, that you pick up until you get to the trial itself. You can do some meta things, like you do like what I was talking about at the dance, where I said they won't break a ship up, they'll kill a pair that's being shipped here at the dance, right? And Linju did indeed do that. He did not break up a ship. So you could do stuff like that maybe to kind of meta your logic your way in. But there isn't any evidence left over. So it's really difficult. Linju is trying to play with the novel idea of what would happen if the Blackened confessed right away at the beginning of the trial. Which, I mean, it's what you expect, right? If the Blackened confessed right away at the beginning of the trial, you go, well, the Blackened may not do that, so we got to investigate. Not really that creative. Everyone's probably thought of that, but besides do that little thing different than, the typical Danganronpa trial with that. Again, another kind of short trial, like Chapter 3, where you're like, oh, this is kind of disappointingly short. And a lot of the important stuff is withheld till the trial in Ace Attorney style, which I'm not necessarily a fan of. I don't know. I still liked it. It was pretty good. Chapter 5, I guess the Black one was the mastermind. And that was right in the spirit of what I said, right? I was trying to say just like, someone who was orchestrating the game as opposed to someone who was in the game. That being said, you'd have to consider the AI Monokuma to be the mastermind. And the AI Monokuma, although it was orchestrating the game, it wasn't the person that the Linju would have considered the mastermind, and that person would have been Utsuru. So it depends on whether or not you think the mastermind was sufficient wording to grant me that one or not. And that's it for how well I did the predictions. I will say the last chapter 5, I haven't played on the original build yet, that trial is like, it's just lame. It's like obvious that it was impossible for a human to do that. So it's obvious the mastermind did the setup, and then it just like heartbreaks you into oblivion because the mastermind just straight up gets away with it. It's analogous to as if Junko would have killed off Kyoko in Trigger Happy Havoc. It's the bad ending round, but it's canon, right? It's really brutal. Maybe it's good because it's brutal. Although it's not very mechanically complex. And as kind of a side here, note, another thing to give as a note of summary. There's oddly a lot of things about this game that are very similar to V3, and this game predates V3. Unfortunately, I'm not really prepared here. I'm gonna look something up. Danganronpa wiki, right? That page gives me the release dates. Yeah, the final chapter of this was in 2015, released in 2015, whereas the V3 was released in 2017. Which some of them you would think that mine's independent. That's a natural progression of ideas as to making more Danganronpa games, and isn't really suspicious. You would think it makes sense that Kodaka and his team and Linju would think of the same thing. Some of them not so much. One is the casino in the second or third floor, I forget which one, of the school. There's also a casino in V3, and just like here, there is a unlockable scene with the characters. It unlocks if you get a certain gift in your inventory, where the characters gamble in that casino. I think it might have opened in the same chapter too, as well. I'm not sure about that. It opens in chapter 1, 2, or chapter 3 of V3. That's weirdly similar. But maybe they both Kodaka and Linju came up with that idea independently. I don't know. Some other things are, there is a character who has super high school level talent, is a maid. Their role they play in the story is much different. Their character design is much different. Their personalities are different. The way the other characters interact with them is different. It's all very different, but they both have a maid. And similarly, that maid worked for rich people in the past and so on. They both have 3 survivors. If you remember, Trigger Happy Havoc has 5. Danganronpa 2, Goodbye Despair, has all of them, but 5, as you know of, at the end of the game. Whereas V3 is more brutal with the killings, and only 3 end up at the end. Same thing with this game. 3 survive at the end. There's another one. I'm not going to remember all of these off the top of my head. The whole idea of the fake personalities thing. So if you remember in V3, the masterminds of the game try to convince the characters at the end that they had fake personalities and memories just loaded into them, into bodies provided by people which were nothing like them. Essentially, they took people and completely replaced their personalities and memories, such that whoever possessed the body previously essentially died. And what you are is an artificially created personality. And although that is somewhat true, as you would reflect on at the end of the game, that their memories they do have some fake memories in them. Their personalities, as you know, because you observe Kaede and Suichi at the beginning before they got their personality replaced, are extremely similar to what they were before the replacement. And that also suggests that perhaps the memories were also very similar, just certain aspects of them were exaggerated. And their super high skill level talents, yes, they weren't as good at them as that they thought they were. There is an implication that Kaede still could play piano pretty well before they changed her memory so that she thought she could play piano extremely well. So they were just kind of tweaked a little bit. They weren't completely replaced. In this game, you do have something sort of similar, where Akane and Yuki seem to have this fake personality, where they are somewhat different than how they were before the killing game started. However, it's not... It seems like it's more like the idea was they deleted their own memories of each other. Basically, they deleted all their memories except for what was required for, like, human function, right? So, like, Yuki went through the whole time not realizing that he didn't remember what his mother's name was. Kind of weird, huh? Basically, Yuki got a bunch of his memories deleted and somehow didn't notice that. Including the memory of his talent, right? So, Yuki's basically, his personality is essentially what Utsuru's personality would have been should he not have been given the talent that he was given. And Akane's personality, you would think, would also be what Akane's personality would have been given that she would not, if she had not met Utsuru. So they're not really fake, they're just hypothetical. But maybe that's somewhat of a similar idea. There are more similarities. I can't remember them right now, though. Yeah, I can't remember them off the top of my head. They might show up to me. I might pop into my head later as I keep talking about this. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play up into the intermission, I believe, of the Chapter 5 trial on the original build. I'm starting the project of... Let's see, are these Chapter 5 notes? These might be notes for Chapter 4. I'm going to pause the encoding and find my Chapter 5 notes. Well, I'm just going to talk while I'm doing it. So, I'm going to try to get through the remainder of this game on the original build. And then that would ideally allow me to play that free time event mode that you can play at the end. On the original build where I can use the text extractor and I can machine translate the free time events into English. Now, it may not let me play all of the free time events for all the characters, just purely all the characters for which I've already played the free time events for, which is kind of pointless, and the ones which I've bought their skills using the coins in the machine. So when I do the daily life portion, or that says more like a deadly life, the investigation portion of Chapter 6, I'm going to see if I can, in that process, buy the skills of as many characters as I can, and then use that to do the free time events of those characters in the post mode. Now, in the Zephyrum build, there was a way to buy them afterwards, after the trial, but however, I think that might have been a modification that Zephyrum did, so I want to be careful, I want to make sure I buy them before I go into the Chapter 6 trial. I'm going to pause and get my notes. Okay, I found my notes, so I can dive right into the game. However, I'm going to pause again as soon as I do this, because I'm going to do some truth bullet cataloging. Say 15. Look at the truth bullets, and I'll do this without recording it because it's going to be tedious to record it. So I'm just going to do this off recording. Okay, I'm back. Something I thought of while writing this was Kurukawa knew that Utsuru, who said it was Yuki, was the mastermind the entire time. But it isn't until the very end where she chooses to try to pin the crime on him at the end that she really took a move that was particularly negative towards him in light of her knowledge that he and Akane were behind this. In fact, she even tries to encourage Akane in Chapter 2. I would think that Linju knew that that's what he was going to go, where he was going to go, that Kurukawa knew who the mastermind was the whole time, just couldn't say because she would die, because that was how her condition worked. So she really did have this thing where she would believe in you until the end. Even she would try to capitalize on how you had lost your own memory, try to convert out the mastermind. I guess. She's like a crazy forgiver. I don't know. Her crazy forgiver nature got a bunch of people killed, so I don't know how much I can respect that, but wow. Very interesting character. Very interesting. Okay, let's begin. Here we go. All rise, I believe is what that would say. In Hanja. First of all, let's start with a brief explanation of the class trial. The outcome of the trial will be decided by your votes. If you point out the correct person as the Blackened, only the Blackened will be punished. But if you point out the wrong person as the Blackened, everyone except the Blackened will be punished, and only the Blackened who deceived everyone graduates with honor. Well, let us begin. The culprit is Kurukawa. There is nothing more to look at. Oh, you got started on your own? It does not matter, but please discuss it carefully. Wait a minute, Otori. We've only just begun. It's just the beginning. There's nothing, of course there's nothing more to see, right? But there's nothing about sleep. To go have to get to the bottom of this go to sleep thing. Isn't it just the beginning and there is nothing more to see? Previously, I held back because Makara was the first one to investigate, but now I can make my claim honestly. This is my class trial? What in the world? Is that really what he's saying? Since it is a class trial, it's mine, it is a class trial. It is Kurokawa. The culprit is Kurokawa. Does not everyone know it? I think is what that's supposed to be. Wasn't Kurokawa at the scene covered in blood when Maeda and Mekaru discovered the body? Moreover, everyone except Kurokawa were together. Oh, Tori-kun, just calm down a little. Like Maeda-kun said, we're just getting started. Wouldn't it be a good idea to at least sort out the incident? No! I'm calming down as much as I can right now. This is so far different. It is so different. It is not a cry, or based on imagination out of desire to escape reality, but a conclusion reached after thorough analysis. Thorough analysis says she was standing there covered in blood. Of course, I think Mikako-chan is the most suspicious. The truth seems to be different from before, so just shut up and start discussing. Shut up and start discussing, that's an interesting phrase. I get what it's supposed to mean, but out of context, what? No. No. Kurokawa is not Kurokawa the culprit? Of course, I also see Kurokawa as the main suspect. Motori is so reckless right now that we need to have a discussion. First of all, it would be better to convince Motori. I probably forgot the controls. Whatever, I'm gonna fail. So he's clean knife. Okay. On the last statement made by Teruya. Okay, well. See if I can pull that off. There's the right truth bullet. I just gotta wait till that statement comes up. Not that one, apparently. Okay, not that one, apparently. Okay, getting ready. Shoot! Okay. Wait, what skill did that to my focus gauge? What in the world? Do I have unlimited focus now or something? Otori. Just because she was holding a kitchen knife didn't mean that she's the criminal. What are you talking about? Anyone can see that she was holding a weapon. It's not like she was cooking in there. No. You can tell by looking at the body of Kisaragi, the victim in this incident. Kisaragi wasn't stabbed to death with a kitchen knife. It says so in the Monokuma file, that there were no other wounds other than the hole in the chest. That's right, and crucially, there wasn't a single drop of blood on the kitchen knife. There's no trace of stabbing anyone at all. I guess that's why I'm sorry for forcing it. But then, what on earth was the kitchen knife? Unless it was used for the murder. So I'm not saying, let us have a discussion that includes that, right? So let's break this apart into Google Translate. So I'm not saying let's have a discussion that includes that. I don't know, it's not saying, it's probably I am saying. I guess it got reverted because of machine translation problems. I admit that Kurokawa is suspicious, but that doesn't mean we can just assume that she is the culprit. I understand. I'm sorry, I'm so indifferent. Different? Let's break it up into pieces again. I did that inadvertently and out of habit. Okay. I have a trigger-happy habit. I feel like I haven't grown at all. No, because I understand. That's enough? Or is that enough? So let's start organizing the case. Wait a minute. Before that, is it okay for a moment? What else? No, that is it. That thing next to Monokuma. What is that? Why is Kisaragi's portrait over there? Well... that? This? Question mark? Don't worry about it. I had no choice because there wasn't enough space. Or there wasn't another seat. Seat? Kisaragi was a person who had no business being in the class court from the beginning, but he didn't have an assigned seat. Don't talk about anything that has nothing to do with the trial. Let's start the discussion quickly. Let's break that apart. We're still breaking apart. Oh, look at that guy. He's changing his words again. Oh, okay. There's nothing we can do about it, so... It's not wrong to say that the class trial is our top priority right now. Let's start by organizing the case. I knew it. First of all, the victim in this incident is Kisaragi. The incident occurred this morning. We were all together except Mikako-chan. Yes, at that time, Kisaragi's condition suddenly became a little strange, and he ran to the fifth floor looking for Kurokawa. It was like he had become a different person. What on earth was Kisaragi or whatever? That's okay, because nothing to do with the incident. Even if you want to know anyway, you can't know because he's dead, so just forget it. Anyway, we sensed something was wrong and chased Kisaragi to the second floor. Or the fifth floor, that is. To the fifth floor. Only... the floor was already covered in blood and something bad had happened. At that time, Hikaru gave instructions to me and Taira and told Kinjo... told me to check on the laboratory... me to check on Kinjo, and Taira to go to the laboratory where the bloodstains were visible, or originated. Oh, and Kinjo... basically, we conclude that nothing was wrong with Kinjo, and that we got crucial clues from the lab. Crucial clue, what was in the lab? For now, I'll have to sort that out later. Oh. Anyway, Maya and I tried to enter the record room with bloodstains on it, but we couldn't open the door. Of course, you need a password to enter the records room. I was told this when investigating the fifth floor. But it seemed clear that something had happened in the records room, and while we were thinking about what to do, I was taken by Mekaru to the ballroom. Suddenly, surprisingly, the ballroom was connected to the 5th floor. The 2nd floor of the ballroom was connected to the 5th floor. With a white cloth. I don't know. Which is basically there's a white cloth allowing you to climb up to the second floor of the ballroom. And the door you see when you go up while holding the cloth is directly connected to the back door of the recording room, or the records room, or the archives, or whatever you want to call it. When Tyra and I tried to enter the records room, I was told to come back to the ballroom, and I wondered what you were talking about. I never thought the ballroom and the records room were connected. The cloth must have been tied up by the criminal? Question mark. I guess so. This means that the criminal had to do the same to enter the records room. The criminal did not know the password. Of course, it's a facility that is originally in the building, and we, including the criminal, don't know anything about the facility. Yeah, I thought so too, but Mekaru said the culprit might know the password. Let's talk about that later, because it's not... Let's talk about that later. Starting now is important. Okay. Anyway, when we entered the records room through the ballroom, we found Yamato Kisaragi dead. The woman in front of the dead Yamato Kisaragi was Kurokawa Mikako, covered in blood. For now, this is the summary of the incident. Yes. As expected, except for Mikako-chan. That said, I was sorry for forcing it earlier without even trying to discuss it, but no matter how I look at it, there's no one other than Kurokawa able to commit the crime. But the criminal fails to deceive us in the class... If the criminal succeeds to deceive us in the class trial, we will be executed. But if the criminal fails to deceive us in the class trial, he will be executed. Okay. Did he really commit the crime so easily? Right, would he really make it so obvious, what he's saying? There's some trick we don't know about. Now I think about it, you said Mekaru found a crucial clue a little while ago. What was going on in the lab? It's an important clue, but it's difficult to figure out the whole case with just that. What we found in the lab probably says that too, but because I heard it from Tyra and went to check it out. Yeah, what was in the lab? It was the meat, right? Meat. I'm talking about the bloody flesh that was in Mikaru's laboratory. Mikaru's laboratory. That was in the laboratory. A chunk of human flesh? Yes, after hearing from Tyra, I went and checked it out myself. It must have been the flesh of the chest of Yamato Kisaragi. Rather... Otori must have entered the laboratory before the broadcast sounded. What? More than that, Otori, you must have entered the laboratory before the broadcast went off. Did he? Why is he accusing... I don't remember why she would accuse Otori of that. I might be reading it wrong. No, I didn't see that. I was in a hurry. Okay, so he did, but he didn't see it. That's right, I was surprised when I first found it. The fact that Kisaragi-kun's flesh is in the laboratory means that Kisaragi-kun was murdered in the laboratory, question mark? That means he was murdered... Was he murdered in the records room? But even so, isn't it impossible for anyone other than Kurokawa to commit the crime? Well, that's true, but the location of the murder can also be a very important clue. If we don't know the culprit, we're in trouble. Otori, you look a little dissatisfied. Let's see here. Since I cooperated, I am very full, question mark. I don't know what that means, but something like very tired. No, it's not really like that. I'm sorry. I'll just be quiet. As expected, no matter what you say, the conclusion is no other than Kurokawa could have committed the crime. But you can't come to a conclusion like this without knowing anything. The biggest obstacle in this case is, of course... Let's talk about it with everyone. Okay, I use everyone's alibis on the sixth statement and agree with Akane. Okay. Well, that's that one. Okay. So I don't have to change truth bullets. As Tyra said, no matter what clues we give, we cannot deny the fact that we were together at the time of the incident. Only by resolving that issue somehow will the truth be revealed. Now wait, why does the story seem to be going in the direction that there's a culprit among us excluding Kurokawa? If the alibis are perfect, common sense tells us that Kurokawa must be the culprit. Why is Kurokawa the person involved increasingly distant from the suspect? Because, why? It's so obvious that Mikako Kurokawa wins the award. Or is this a suspect? It almost makes me wonder if someone is trying to put the charges against Mikako Kurokawa. I agree with you, something feels off. Since it's a class trial where if we make a mistake even once, your life is at stake, if you are not sure, you need to think more. You're saying it so openly. Are you not afraid at all? Mikaru, normally you would trust the clues that point to the culprit and give an answer, but you're afraid of something, so you're trying to be careful? She has no alibi and covered in blood. Moreover, there's evidence that in that bedsheet, so anyone can clearly see that she is the culprit. Don't make a fuss. It's already so complicated. You're going to be annoying. Or what? Does this mean you're the criminal? Is that possible? Don't joke. Tori-kun. What do you mean bedsheet? What is that? Oh, now I think about it, Tyro doesn't know. bedsheet was definitely a clue given to Otori at the end. Given by Otori at the end. The place Otori took us to was Kurokawa's room, which is the last one. Just before the end of the investigation time, Otori called me and Mikaru took us somewhere. The place Otori took us was Kurokawa's private room. Mikako-chan's private room? So I stopped by the room before the trial started, but the door to Kurokawa's private room was wide open. So I looked inside for a moment, and there's no bed sheets in Kurokawa's private room. What? Really? You suddenly or something? Try to break this apart here. So, comma, Kachakya, explanation point, comma, space, explanation question. Oh, what a surprise. Wow, all of a sudden, something like that. Didn't say anything till now, but suddenly, has something happened? Oh, nothing. No. So you know the bed sheets were gone, but what does that mean? Tyra, there's a white cloth hanging on the second floor of the ballroom. I didn't think you've seen that before, question? I think I saw it. Perhaps the cloth was the bedsheet from her private room? Yes, it's probably the bedsheet from Mikako Kurokawa's private room. Yeah, that's really conclusive evidence. Just like Mikako-chan's racks a little while ago, I can't even gamble at this point. No, I think that makes it even more likely that Mikako Kurokawa is not the culprit. Eh? Fools, think about it just a little bit. Said she used her own bedsheet to hang in the ballroom. Say she used her own bedsheets and hang them in the ballroom. Then it wasn't enough to hide that fact, so she even left the door wide open. Don't you think it's strange? Or she didn't try to hide that, she left the door wide open. This incident itself happened in such a short period of time that I may have forgotten it. There's something else you forgot. And that's not the only reason. When I took a quick look around the dormitory before chasing after Yamato Kisaragi, there's no sign of Mikako Kurokawa's private room door being open. I haven't looked closely, but the door for the dormitory of the school area and Mikako Kurokawa's private room are straight ahead, so you can see them without going close. Right. As you said, the door was wide open. But you said the door was wide open. Actually, it was wide open when I took Maeda there too, right? I tried it as if trying to it was as if trying to show off that the door was open. Now, just a moment. Kurokawa... it's supposed to be Kurokawa's the only one who can open the door, right? If we come back right after chasing Kisaragi and open the door, she would inevitably... If she came back right after chasing Kisaragi and opened the door, she would inevitably encounter us. That's why I'm saying this. In short, the person who opened the door to Mikako Kurokawa's private room was one of us. Then that person is the culprit? There's a high probability of that happening. He used Mikako Kurokawa's bedsheet in the crime and left the door open, as if to show it off. If the goal is to place all the charges on Mikako Kurokawa, Is it not plausible? Actually, we were always suspicious of Kurokawa. But, no. It's all just speculation. Even if there is a culprit among us, it's impossible for anyone other than Kurokawa to have committed the crime. By the way, Kurokawa Mikako, you too, please participate in the discussion now, or will you? In fact, hearing your testimony is the most important thing. You didn't say a word during the investigation. What you experienced at the time of the incident holds the key to this incident. Shut up, phone. Sorry. Well, I don't know. Mikako-chan. Damn it, Kurokawa. Are you a something? Are you a something else? Are you a victim? I'm starting to get confused. Well, you're always confused. It's not even. See if I can break this apart. Okay, what are you doing now? Are you a victim? Now even I'm starting to get confused. Okay, next. Yeah, I wonder if I can say this, but there is no possibility that Kisaragi-kun committed suicide. As in the case of Kobashikawa a while ago, the incident itself was staged as a play. Unfortunately, it is impossible for Kisaragi Yamato to commit a series of crimes. It would be impossible to open the private room door that I just talked about a moment ago. Huh. Even if there is someone trying to frame charges against Kurokawa, everyone has an alibi, making it impossible for them to commit the crime. How did you open Mikako-chan's room in the first place? Or did you have to take the key? Or how did they? How did they open the room in the first place? Did they have to take the key? Guys, the case becomes more complicated because of the alibis. Then how about assuming the criminals as an imaginary person and then discussing the method of the crime? A seventh person? It's because I don't think I'll ever get better if I keep complaining about alibis like this. Let's first talk about the method of the crime, assuming that there is someone other than us who can roam around freely. I agree also. I'm embarrassed for someone as talented. It's embarrassing for someone as talented as me, but I can't help but feel ignorant about this incident. Yes, I think that would be good too. Come to think of it, I think I heard something similar from Mikako-chan last time. Approaching the case from another side based on a testimony that has already been given without considering the truth or falsity of the testimony. Did you remember that again? Yes, I can't give up. We can't give up just because we're stuck in one place. Let's designate a hypothetical person capable of committing a crime, assume that person's actions, and discuss the method of committing the crime. Okay, you want to use anesthetic gas and agree with Ray on the 9th line, apparently. Okay. Okay, so this one, I guess.
かもしれないよ。
What kind of method is a smoke bomb? It's Mekaru. What kind of method? If I thought about it, but wouldn't it be possible if they used that? The anesthetic gas tank? What anesthesia? Tyra, did you not see it when you went to the lab? There's something like a strange tin can rolling around. I heard about it from Mekaru. It's called the anesthetic gas. Spraying the compressed anesthetic gas in the form of a grenade. If exposed, the entire body becomes temporarily numb and the body cannot function properly. Well, where'd you get such a dangerous item? Probably because it was the armory. It was probably from the armory inside the ballroom. But the ballroom itself was wide open. In fact, Kinjo also brought a pistol from the armory. If you use the anesthetic gas, you can neutralize not only Kisaragi-kun, but also Mikako-chan together. Even so, since Kisaragi went to look for Kurokawa, there is a high possibility the two were together. If you take the two people unable to move, kill Kisaragi, make Kurokawa splatter blood on Kurokawa, and make her stand in front of the corpse, in theory, an image similar to the incident will be created. It doesn't even knock you out, it just paralyzes you. If that's true, didn't Kurokawa see the criminal? That is, if you use a tool to hide your identity, you won't be discovered. It's a bit strange that Kurokawa doesn't talk about what happened to her, but... Now wait a minute, there's another problem. First of all, using anesthetic gas means moving two people from the laboratory to the records room. I don't know if it's just one person, but it's hard to move two people by yourself. From what we've heard, that's true too, and it was that short period of time before we came up, I guess. It was a short period of time before we came up. Anesthetic gas exploded in the laboratory. That means, as Tyra said, the two people in the laboratory were moved to the records room. It's hard to move one person, but it's even harder to move two in that short period of time. But it's not impossible. It's definitely a way to move two people easily. The evidence is... Bloody cart is, of course, in my notes. That takes us over halfway through the trial when I select bloody cart. No, there is a way to easily transport two people by yourself. You can use a cart. A cart? I didn't see it when I was investigating the records room. There was a cart that looked... I did see it when investigating the records room. There was a cart that looked like it could be used to transport something. And it was covered in blood also. Ah, I remember. It's not the cart that was originally in the entrance to the lab. Or is it not the cart that was originally at the entrance to the lab? Question? Yes. That's right. Surprisingly, the place where the anesthetic gas is presumed to have been used is also the laboratory. I can think of one possibility that the cart from the lab was in the records room covered in blood. They moved Kisaragi and Kurokawa. That's right. If you use a cart to transport them, you can easily move the two people without using any effort. Or using little effort. By moving Kurokawa, including Kisaragi's body, it became impossible to place the charges against Kurokawa. Watashi no manga. I like the accent, but whatever. Wait. You were talking smugly earlier, but I can think of that much as well. Why are you like this, Makaru? Is there something wrong? If the case is solved so easily, I wouldn't say anything either. There is an error in your argument. Don't confuse me with false information. And just stay still. No. Okay. Door password. Oh. What's door password? Door password. I need to look at my notes. I have time to look at my notes. Okay. There we go, that's the right one. Okay. What? No. Kisaragi's password. Maybe? Use the wrong one? What? Let's try this one, I guess. Kisaragi's password. Shift. Nope. Okay, my notes say, would door password have to know the password second yellow only round. What? Okay. Nope. Okay. There's no way I can review I can't review the truth bullets. Maybe I just the wrong yellow. Let's try Kisaragi's password on the other yellow. Nope. I might die and lose my money. Great. That would be a disaster. Okay. Say you need the password. That's the end of it. Okay, so this is... Choose the right how now I have loaded to the record room door. But it's not the password, it's just the door. Okay. This is Kisaragi's password, is this truth bullet. Okay, so Kisaragi's password. Huh. Oh. Well, didn't I already try that? Okay, well I didn't die. I have one health left. I don't know. Whatever. I don't know what's going on there, but... Wait a minute. What if Mikaru, it wasn't actually like that? What? Please take a look at this first. I know what it... Do you know what this is? 0430. What number is that? And it's bloody. You can't say that. That's right. Or you don't say. That's right. I think it might be the password for the records room. Wait. How did you know the password, Maeda? I'm not sure yet. I would check to see if it's a real records room password, but I think it's highly likely. Where'd you find that? Kuokawa gave it to me while I was researching. Yes, Kuokawa? Just give me an answer. So Mikako-chan knew the password? Well, I'm not sure about that. Kuokawa said that she found it on Kisaragi's body. In that case, there is a possibility that the culprit also learned the password from Kisaragi. That's right. If you could enter and exit the records room to the front door, wouldn't it be easy to transport two people from the lab to the records room on the cart? Amazing, as expected, Maeda-kun. It seems like the method of the crime has been roughly figured out, so now all we have to do is identify the culprit. Is that really so? What is it, Mikaru? I kept thinking it was suspicious, but at this rate, it's getting more and more suspicious. What are you talking about? Well, who is the culprit? Yuki Maeda. It's you. What? And then it goes to intermission, right? Okay, I have to save, I'm going to save the game. Right there. And I'm actually going to stop recording right here. This is where this part's going to end. Because there's only 3 things. A non-stop, a second non-stop, and another rebuttal showdown. However, the whole scene takes a long time because you have to go through the ending dialogue and the execution, and then after the execution. And so the recording will be like an hour and a half to get through the whole remainder of the trial, and I have other things I want to record and do. So I'm just going to stop this, and I'll pick up on the remainder of the Chapter 5 trial in a different recording.